The Emperor of Mankind is dead. Not a space lich on the throne, not undead, no. The Emperor is fully dead, according to Fulgrim. And I would normally take anything he said with a grain of salt, but after looking at the lore around the Dark King, the Terminus Decree, and the Primordial Annihilator, it all finally makes sense. For decades, I have, like most of the Warhammer community, believed the Golden Throne is keeping the Emperor alive. Mostly dead or even undead, perpetually dying, he's in a constant state of repair and decay, barely holding on by a thread as he sucks down souls to stave off death and keep the Astronomicon lit. But in light of a lot of new lore, I've come to believe that the throne is not keeping Big E alive at all. In fact, what it seems to actually be doing is quite the opposite of that. The Golden Throne is keeping the Emperor of Mankind dead. I know, on its face it sounds heretical right off the bat, and sure, it is certainly a radical concept, but it does seem to be the case. And if the throne fails, what if the problem isn't that the Emperor will die? What if it is that he will resurrect? We know he almost became the Dark King, and Malcador did say that it is already born in the warp, that it is a certainty, an inevitability, an eventuality that humanity will have to face as sure as the Eldari face their own demise with the birth of Slaanesh. And here's the crux of the matter. The Dark King exists in the warp. The Primordial Annihilator, the manifestation of Chaos Undivided itself. But it came through into the material universe through the Emperor, aboard the Vengeful Spirit. And the Emperor of Mankind is perhaps the only being in the entire galaxy, probably the entire universe, that is capable of being the gateway for such a being, of being the physical vessel that houses such an all-powerful entity. The Emperor is doing the single most heroic thing he can do by being dead, as he's unable to hold off the Dark King in perpetuity. Eventually it will overcome him, and he'll give in, bringing about the birth in the Imperium of the Lord of the Immaterium itself. So he becomes installed upon the throne. Now we assume that the throne is amplifying his powers, as that's what we've been led to believe. But doesn't it make a lot more sense that it is doing all the work? He's just a skeleton sitting there dead as a doornail. The throne may just be, and probably is, Necron in origin. We know that what the people of the Imperium believe to be the Emperor on the throne is propaganda, and that to Diocletian's experience at least, the custodian perceives him as a regular super dead skeleton on a basic looking chair kept in some back room away from the prying eyes of the public. The Emperor exists, sure, but is he doing anything? I don't believe so. I think the throne is doing it all, and is what is consuming all those souls. Especially after reading Carrion Lord of the Imperium. Now people will immediately disagree and point out that the Emperor spoke to Guilliman. Sure, he did. But not with lips, a tongue, or even a mouth. He doesn't have those. He psychically spoke to Rabute, and it was like 1,000 shards of insanity all screaming at once from the void. I believe that what Rabute Guilliman spoke with was his father's presence in the warp, and I believe that it is most easily contacted or interacted with from and on Holy Terra. That the corpse, the rotting husk of the greatest psyker, the greatest human who ever lived, is merely an anchor point, a physical remnant in the materium that the being that is the Emperor in the warp can use as a focal point to interact with humanity. Now, if the Emperor knew what he was up against with his inevitable apotheosis to the Dark King, and he very much did by the time he cast off the mantle of that most malicious of entities, he would want to find a way to keep that from happening. Not to just stave it off for however long he could, but to actually keep it from being able to happen. And the Emperor played the one ace up his sleeve he still had. He died. Now he's a perpetual and should heal back from anything. However, people will point out that Rogel Dorn and Constantine Valdor thought the wounds that Horus inflicted upon the Emperor were too grievous to recover from, even for Big E. But that was never tested. But it's worth noting that nobody thought Khan would survive either, and he did. Rogel assumed that the Emperor couldn't regenerate, and he assumed the throne would sustain Big E. But honestly, it looks like it is sucking the life out of him even as it tries to pour back into him. This is, in my mind, one of the darkest secrets the Emperor has. He's keeping the universe from being devoured by his insanely evil alter ego that is a primordial chaos god, who the Eldari literally call the Primordial Annihilator, the king of all chaos gods, all by being too dead to be used in the physical universe. Now, before we look at some passages from the End and the Death concerning the Dark King, we need to understand this in the context of the recently revealed Terminus Decree. Held in a simple wooden box that only the Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights may open, the Terminus Decree details the Emperor's final command to the Grey Knights chapter. The Master of Mankind can never be allowed to leave the Golden Throne, either return to life, reborn in another's body, or ascend as some kind of warp entity. And if he does, the Grey Knights must return him to his terrible duty. Indeed, they were created with the possibility of this event in mind, a task beyond the abilities of any other force in the Imperium. The decree offers no guidance on how such feats might be achieved, for it is neither a weapon nor a magic formula. Rather, the Grey Knights would themselves be the weapon on such a desperate day, one that would likely have to cut a path through the ranks of the Custodian Guard and many others to see its duty done. Deep, and quite an insane mission to be given, even for such a specialized force as the 666th chapter. The Grey Knights are ordered to do everything in their power to keep Big E on that throne no matter what. Whether it is a task they are up to or not is another matter entirely, but they are tasked with that difficult, insanely difficult job, should it be required. Why does it say that he cannot resurrect or ascend? Because then he'd be alive again, in some form, and would be susceptible to being overcome, overwhelmed, and corrupted into letting in the Dark King, and ushering in the death of the Imperium and of humanity. The Grey Knights must make sure that he stays dead, stuck in that chair, the only known device in the galaxy that can keep him in the state he needs to be in. Dead. When Horus died and the inevitable city retreated from the face of Terra, when the Immaterium separated again from the Materium, there was a great vacuum, sucking in like an enormous black hole, consuming the psychic Empyrean energies of the entire solar system. It was like a tsunami pulling everything out to sea rather than crashing down on Terra and the system. And to me, the Emperor on the throne is like a stopper, plugging the drain. Malcador, when he sat the throne ever so briefly, had quite the discussion with Horus about what the Emperor had done, and why it was Horus's own fault for pushing him to that. Horus, in his hubris, had assumed himself the Dark King. He assumed his father stole from the Chaos Gods, but rather he may just be the wellspring from which they themselves flow. Horus had to play Warhammer Fantasy battles against Khorne, Slaanesh, Tzeentch, and Nurgle, and claim his power, which was all a joke, a gag, a prank, to make him their thrall. They tricked him into believing he bested them and deserved their power, so they graciously bestowed it upon him. But his father, the Emperor of Mankind, was able to snatch power straight away from the Big Four. Why? How? Because he outranks them. They're aspects of him in so many ways, as he's the Primordial Annihilator. So Malcador salts the wounds of Horus's ego, letting him know that Big E is everything that he himself thought he was becoming, and it's his own fault. Horus understands that he's been cheated and that he could have been so much more from his perspective, his very twisted perspective. You have brought the Emperor face to face with chaos, first found, closer than when he sat upon the throne or walked the shrieking halls of the Webway, perhaps closer even than when he last faced the Four and took their fire from them on Moloch. You have brought chaos to his very door and forced him to look it in the eye. Do not then expect him not to use it. I see him look down at his hands. They are sheathed in auramite, because it is almost quantum inert, and thus most efficacious in the manipulation of immaterial forces. Bare skin is better, this much he knows. He tears his right gauntlet off, hangs it from his harness, and seizes the Immaterium with bare hand and a bared mind. It is scalding and alive with anger, but my lord is no longer constrained by the constant duties of the throne. That is my burden now. There is no time. There are no clocks. There is no pain. My master hears only the crackle of the warp. I watch as he harnesses that sound and uses it as a focus, a drishti, to regulate his work. The Immaterium presses at him. It seeks to overwhelm and drain him, but he understands its fire. It is the same fire he stole from the four Annihilators and used to keep them at bay, the same fire he has wielded for centuries to drive them back whenever they have come too close. They flinched then, from their own fire. They flinch now. They have forced this confrontation, First Found. They have brought my lord into a realm of chaos to face you. Did you think that would weaken him and grind him down? How can he grow weak when there is a limitless power around him to draw upon? You do not put out a fire by throwing fuel upon it. He draws upon your flames. Over the millennia, he has worn many masks, each suitable to the task at hand. His mind, his greatest gift, allows him flexibility in such things. Now you can see him at his truest aspect, as terrible as he can be when terror is the only recourse. He is Ordo ab Chao. He is Lux in Tenebris. The Emperor lights up your pitiful, wretched ruin of a ship. He burns back your perfidious darkness. He empowers his ailing companions and rekindles their courage. He shares his searing mind sight with them, banishing the false heavens and murderous paradises you conjured to drown them. He sharpens their senses and the edges of their blades. He fires the cryptochromes in their eyes, the retinal proteins he wove into their construction that lets them read magnetic fields and allows them to see the actual physical structure of this place behind the congealing lies and illusions. He boosts their data-depleted senses and banishes the cognitive dissonance created by the isotopic space around them. They drive forward, smashing through the demon's energumenical mass, possessed by will and power and abreactive fire. The decks shudder as infamous beasts collapse and die, or stagger, howling back into the shadows, trailing blood or mauled limbs. Horned things, tusked things, insectile horrors come apart under raining blows and roaring shells, deliquescing into slicks of Ithrakis sludge and splattering the walls and floors with sizzling ionthine blood. My master begins his vastation, advancing blow by blow and death by death into the dark heart of your lair, searing away the evils that you throw at him, edging ever closer to your abditory, your inner sanctum. Your attempts to stop your father have forced his hand, obliging him to become stronger and reject notions of mercy, to adopt the aspect I hoped he would never have to wear. I am reluctant to admit it, but this pleases me. I am most delighted to have lived just long enough to see his ultimate fury unleashed. The things he slays, dead, undead, or never born, incinerate in outrage at the power he is wielding. They see him for what he is, First Found. They see him in the aspect you have forced him to assume. Emperor, master of mankind, thanatizer of demons, annihilator of the annihilators, bearer of stolen fire, deathbringer to the false and pitiful four. He is here, First Found, in rage, in extremity, in theandric fury. He is here and he is coming for you, with all of the vengeance and malice you are owed. No more restraint. His reluctance is gone. He will take great pleasure in obliterating you. For I hear his mind ringing through the warp. I am here, Horus Lupercal, and for you, I am the end and the death. Yes, the Emperor is coming for Horus, and Malcador lets him know it. The Emperor had to become what he did not want to be in order to face Horus. Or so he thought would be required, before Alanius Pius talked sense into him. But by then, he had to tear his compassion from him and cast it off. We know that the Star Child exists, and to me, that is probably what is responsible for the miracles the Emperor performs and the interactions with the Imperium. But he's a being of the warp, that cast-off part of the Emperor that allowed him to discard the mantle of the Dark King and face his son as a man, not a god. Emperor plants that seed before facing Horus, before being mortally wounded, and before being installed into the perpetual death device that is the Golden Throne. So he's in the warp, a growing god, feeding on the worship of humanity, powerful beyond reproach, and yet as long as the dead body of his physical form stays drained of all life, unable to rejuvenate as is his nature, the Dark King is locked out of real space. That is the truth of how heavy a burden the Emperor carries, and what level of sacrifice he's made for humanity. The Emperor cannot return to us, for he'd destroy us, therefore must be kept in a state of suspended anti-life. Not an undeath, a full-on death state, for he cannot exist in the material universe without endangering us all. This is the cruel fate he endures and the sad irony of his existence. From The End in the Death Volume 2. His light is everywhere. It spills across all other nows. It bleaches the pulped battlescapes of Terra into whiteness. It catches the lines of Valdor's war gear and glints on the harder edges of his two transformed thoughts. It slowly eats away the shadow under the red wall where Dorn shelters, talking to himself. It burns the soul of Sanguinius, though he is buried deep in a lightless crypt. It is the light that casts the shadow of the Dark King. I try to speak. I still cannot. The steadfast light is everywhere, permeating every now that was and could be. In one, ancient inhuman creatures pause in their work, look up from half-built devices of intricate complexity, and shield their eyes against the rising glare. They start to wail. In another, the world is without form and void, and darkness moves upon the face of the deep, and the steadfast light says, "Let me be," and it is. In another, and another, and an infinity of others, there is only light, and its antithesis has burned everything away with its unholy intensity. Only in one now, a gloomy and decaying now, does the light not penetrate. It is a realm of shadows and candlelight, a grim darkness of ruin and disrepair, where men are shackled by ancient duties, imperfectly remembered but obsessively performed, where lamp glow flickers off the flaking gilt of past glories and the faded majesty of once proud emblems, where the functions of machines and the purposes of humans are forgotten or misunderstood, and have been reduced to rote and ceremony and rite, and now where everything, including the meaning of life, has become no more than rehearsed tradition and meaningless ritual. Well, that's certainly dark, and something the Emperor would not want to be. Funny that so many assumed it would be Horus. And as Ahriman and Octay noticed as they consulted the Emperor's tarot in the Hall of Lang in the Emperor's own occult library, section 888, if Horus Lupercal is truly the Dark King Ascendant, then his power will be even greater than I dreaded. I feared he would become godlike, and being so mighty that it was effectively and functionally a god. But if he is anointed as the Dark King, then he is truly a god indeed, a divinity, an omnipotent being. Such a thing. In her wildest visions, she could never have imagined such a creature. The universe is not big enough to contain him. The cardinal powers of chaos are but ghosts of his shadow, and the almighty warp obeys his voice, helpless in his tidal pull. Terrible, beautiful, inconceivable, unimaginable. The Dark King is here, and every atom of the universe will be changed. The Dark King is not the apotheosis of Horus Lupercal, the sorcerer points an ebony finger at the last two cards. The Emperor and the Dark King. They are identical. Fate is confounded, Ahriman says. Your Emperor is the Dark King. Which is such a facepalm moment for them. Ahriman, a guy who thinks he knows everything, had his entire reality turned on its head. The warp. He is drunk of the warp. He has drawn on its power to fight chaos, but he has drunk too much and too deeply. It has made him thus. It has made him the very thing he resolved to stop. The Dark King? That's what the name means. A god. That is what he is in the process of becoming. And the Sigillite's not wrong. He sees the awful truth even as it unfolds. He knows the horror, cosmic and unimaginable as it is. He knows what is coming. Does my king not know what he has done to them? Does he know he has blown them out like oversurged fuses? He must, for I see him there too, my old friend, my king of ages, bloated and transmuted with the warp fire he has absorbed. I have never seen a being so potent. I did not know such a creature was possible. He mocks the gods, real or imaginary, with his power. His senses, perceptions, and capabilities are fast exceeding those mighty gifts he possessed of old, even the utmost potential of them. This entelechy will dwarf them, ascending a whole new scale of ability. What he is becoming now will make the master of mankind seem like a mere mortal. He is becoming a thing of absolutes. No shred of humanity, nor even perpetuity, will remain when the process is complete. He will be ascendant. The substance of creation shudders. Materia and immateria vibrate in shock. The electrons spinning around the protonic nuclei of every atom in the real space universe stutter and briefly cease to obey their mysterious quantum obligations. The power of the Dark King is expelled and scattered, pouring back into the Imperium from whence it came, carrying with it flotsam and jetsam, the broken prophecies and driftwood predictions that brought it hence. The never-born wail, en masse, their whispers turned in on themselves, twisted back into lies and cackled falsehoods, their future, so assured, suddenly untruthed. The malison of the Dark King passes from the material galaxy and back into the simmering caskets of myth, for this age, at least. So, we see the Dark King is Imperium ending, galaxy destroying even. And yes, they thought it was Horus. Even Horus thought it was he who would ascend. But now that we know for sure it is the Emperor, and considering the Terminus Decree and the ramifications of that, we really must consider what the Emperor is doing on the Golden Throne. His plan is actually working, if I am indeed right. He's keeping the universe from dying, the human race at least. It's the slickest move he could have pulled off too, if it is the case. Nobody, not even a chaos god or a whole pantheon of them, could have seen that coming. I guess to summarize, Emperor is not a space lich, he's just a skeleton. If he reconstitutes somehow, he endangers the entire universe. As long as he stays on the throne, he's effectively dead, and the Dark King is a non-issue. The throne is powered by sucking the life force from the Emperor and the thousands of psychers sacrificed to it every day. But also, the throne is failing. Well, that sure seems a lot more grimdark than I thought before. To me, this is the only thing that's really making sense and ties together the lore from pretty much everything. It seems to be the missing link that I've been looking for so long. I guess it all comes down to the fact that Rogel Dorn is not a doctor and probably shouldn't be diagnosing injuries, nor interpreting omens and spirit communications from beyond based on the positions of tarot cards lying around the scene of a bloody massacre. It may just be me, but that all seems like sound logic. Once I had this epiphany, Big E seemed a lot more interesting to me, and also a lot more heroic. What he's sacrificing is beyond anything we can imagine. The only thing left of him is his constant, never-ending suffering, as his soul force is vampirized by a giant mountain-sized Xenos device. Truly grimdark, truly horrific, the fate of the Emperor is so awful to conceptualize that it feels like even Lovecraft or King would have had a hard time coming up with it. I know a lot of people aren't really jiving with the Terminus Decree of the Grey Knights, so hopefully this video put that in a bit more perspective. So this all puts in perspective, for me, just why Fulgrim unequivocally states that his father is long dead and the body is propped up in a chair and worshipped. That the term corpse worshipper isn't just referring to someone who's undead, or as Miracle Max would say, mostly dead. Not a body that is healing from unhealable wounds, no. Fulgrim speaks the truth. His father's dead, and must remain that way, lest all be destroyed. I doubt the Dark King would be so kind to the other powers, the lesser powers of chaos. It would probably be horrible for them too, as if humanity ceased to be, then what race or races would feed the warp gods our thoughts, actions, emotions, etc.? Give them their existence. They're dependent upon us, and so are parasitic. So Dark King is truly the end and the death. The Emperor is the end, literally stopping the worst possible fate from destroying all of reality and unreality, the stopper plugging the drain. But he's also the death, not just of Horus, but of himself. He has to be dead. He has to be death itself. Incredibly grimdark that it takes an ancient piece of necrotech to keep him in a state of death. Truly dark, truly desperate, and truly gritty this setting is. Agree with me or not, I really don't care. This is the image I finally put together of what is going on with Warhammer 40k after decades of thinking about it and a solid year of running this channel. After taking 1,000 bits of lore and assembling them like puzzle pieces, I finally saw this image, and it seemed a dark, terrible truth, just as it should be. Any truth at the core of Warhammer, well, it better be dark, that's for sure. But after distilling my thoughts down, I tried to coalesce them into something coherent enough to express what I'm seeing in video form, so I hope this was successful at conveying my thoughts in overactive imagination, whether you agree with me or not. Glory to the Emperor! Thanks for watching.